Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and his name is Marc Champagne. So for those of you who don't know Marc is someone who unpacks the mental fitness practices and reflective questions shaping the lives of some of the most successful and brilliant thinkers in the world. Marc is the host of the Top 50 podcast Behind the Human, where he has done over 200 interviews. And he is also the co-founder of the journaling app Kayo. And this is an app that has reached over 90 million people around the world. Marc has studied mental fitness practices for over a decade now and has consulted for top-rated App Store featured digital journals. Despite Marc's dedication to mental fitness, Marc hit a mental rock bottom when he made the decision to talk away from Kayo. He had to reassess his next steps and how to get there, while also remaining true to his passion and dedication of helping others. So Marc, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah, same. I appreciate the time.
Awesome. So Marc, let's kind of get kicking here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in Canada? What inspired you to become an entrepreneur? And what exactly is a mental fitness expert?
Yeah, expert is a loaded term in my opinion. Because it signifies you sort of expertise, which I feel like we're all trying to continually grow and whatnot. So expert's loaded. I'd say I'm passionate about mental fitness and continually learning about that and helping as many people as possible through my journey as well and what I'm learning. But to answer some of your earlier questions, I grew up in Northern Ontario, Sudbury. Born and raised there, went to university out that way, moved to Southwestern Ontario, started a career in the corporate world where I know some of your family members, and then eventually bounced around a bit from bigger city to bigger city, Montreal, then Toronto, and now I'm landed here in Collingwood, Ontario, loving the balance of nature, great people, water, great cafes and little restaurants and stuff like that. So it's been a hell of a ride because, I spent about 10 years in the corporate world, but what led me to what I'm doing now was when I was first hired actually in that role at a university. I just remember I started in sales and I remember everyone essentially was being trained up in the exact same way. Either you graduated with a business degree or some sort of science background and you were trained up accordingly for that sales position. And I remember thinking like everyone's doing the same training. So how possibly can I stand out from that group? Like I've got to do something else. I didn't really know what that something else was other than I started getting up earlier in the morning and started reading positive content and started fueling my mind with knowledge that, eventually opened me up to all of these types of mental fitness practices, and reflection being one of the cornerstone practices for me that I would do in the morning before getting started to prime my mind, because we all know things are going to happen throughout the day. It's life that's full of ups and downs. And what I was trying to do was just like Olympic athlete trains their mind and body for the event. I was trying to train my mind for those moments in the day, learning from people around the world. Right. So I did that for the whole duration, essentially, of that career in the corporate world, and eventually just grew frustrated with the digital tools that were available for journaling, because essentially that's what I was doing. And not like, because I used to get this all the time. Oh, journaling, you're talking about like the 13-year-old girl writing about the boy at school in her diary. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, I'm talking about, the people we really respect and are learning from, that we're watching their TED Talks, buying their books, listening to their keynotes, they're all doing some sort of reflection. They're all asking really powerful and great and well-timed questions in their lives and reflecting on those. And that's what I was writing down in those early morning hours. I'd write that down. I'd copy and paste it into a word processor or another app. And it was just disconnected. And at that time, the meditation apps were starting to take off, Headspace and Calm. So the insight was, well, people seem to be open to being guided in a digital fashion when it comes to a wellness space, but there was no one doing anything related to journaling. And it was still very much, again, thought about with all these different preconceived notions of what it was, versus I was seeing it was like this hidden superpower that 100% of those people were doing. Like everyone was reflecting, but no one was really like Tim Ferriss started to talk about it a little bit more, but there wasn't a lot of discussion around the topic. So, I mean, I followed kind of one of those scratch your own itch scenarios, decided to create an app that would take that knowledge and that content, and i.e. primarily questions, and help guide people through a mental fitness practice like journaling or reflection. And, I did it for a while where I had both jobs going and was just trying to figure it out. I was still traveling quite a bit, going to different conferences. And there was one in Montreal, a creativity conference, C2, that was a big kind of shift in, I guess, in the whole path, because I was there for another company, just networking and doing what I was supposed to be doing. But I was also then talking to people and pitching this concept of an app. I'm like, what do you think? Like, I had a mock-up of it, and my co-founder was with me as well. And we were just explaining what we were building to gauge interest. And I remember after the meetings, we'd be getting there'd be like these rapid fire meetings, 15, 20-minute kind of things, networking meetings. We'd get feedback. We'd call up our designer and be like, hey, can you just shift this over? Like the app wasn't actually coded or anything like that. It was all just like mock-ups, but it was interactive mock-ups through Envision. So he was changing things like on the fly, and we kept testing that and seeing how people were responding. And there was enough interest there to really like pique the curiosity around, maybe this is the thing I should be doing full time. And then at that time, having a job in brand management and working on big brand strategies, excuse me, for multi-million-dollar products, I knew that in order to really give this app a shot, there needed to be a really tight plan and some sort of marketing plan, some really key messaging. Because again, the messaging out there was not how I was using that practice. It was very different. So there needed to be a shift in the messaging. And ultimately, that's what we did. I left that job. I never envisioned being an entrepreneur. It's still, even you saying that feels a bit weird. Like, doesn't feel like that's what I do. Even though I guess essentially I am running my own business around this, different products, but same space. And it is my company. And yeah, that's essentially what opened me up to that world. I'll stop there because I mean the story continues, but I mean that was the entry point into the entrepreneurial world.
Awesome, great, Mark. Yeah, thanks for kind of sharing us a little bit about that background of yourself. And you kind of have gave us like an introduction of how you took that plunge into self-employment away from the comfort zone, right, of being in the corporate world. So, Mark, what key lessons did you learn or positive experiences did you internalize to help you prepare for this new direction?
Well, I think realistically speaking, and you've probably heard this before, I know I've heard, but there was a level of being naive to what was to come that I think helped the process the most. Because I mean, sure, there was a plan, there was a financial forecast, there were all these things that, we're making, both my brother-in-law and co-founder and myself, we're making smart decisions and trying not to be, irrational or irresponsible in leaving, my job. Because like I wasn't leaving a job where I was unhappy going in. I actually really enjoyed the job. The team was awesome. I was doing well. Like it was on the typical kind of corporate track, and things were looking really good. So had to make a really smart decision, or at least take as many variables as possible to make an educated decision. Now, had I known how everything would play out financially and mentally and all of that, probably wouldn't have done it. So I'm happy that I didn't know that, because that would have held me back, because there would have just been too much fear. And I think that's what holds a lot of people back, because even when I was leaving and announcing to the team, I could see it in people's faces. There was like this message that they weren't saying, but I could feel it in their eyes, and they were saying, wow, like, you're so courageous for going and doing this. I have an idea too. I would love to do that. Like that's kind of the vibe I was feeling with, I'd say 90% of the people that I was chatting with, that I had known for years and never, ever got that impression from them. So, I mean, that fueled my decision even more, because the last thing I want to do is live with any type of regrets in life. And I 100% would have regretted not taking that plunge and trying that business. And ultimately, the short story of the app, we reached 86.9 million people with it. It was insane. The strategy, the marketing, all of that clearly worked. What didn't work was the business model behind it and development and things like that. We had other hiccups, and it caused us to have to delete the app and not pursue it anymore. But it set me on this path that I'm on now, and the whole reason we're even speaking. So I'm really grateful for that whole experience. And I had to follow the practices that I was getting up with early in the morning to get through that, and all the new practices and all the new reflective questions and everything that was shared from all of the interviews over the years around this space to actually navigate that business in itself.
Thanks for expanding on that there, Marc. So Marc, how would you describe your trade these days? Are you a creator? Are you a developer? Are you a teacher? Are you a mentor? Are you all above? What exactly are you?
Yeah, great question. I'm definitely not a developer. I wish I was a developer. That would have made the journey probably way easier and result in something different. I think we live in a hyphenated society now, where even someone like yourself, like you've got multiple things going on in your world, and I'm no different. I mean, I would say I'm an inspiring writer, soon to be published author, so I'm proud about that. But that's one thing. And then, yeah, I mean, I write every morning about this topic. Some of it's published, some of it's not. Some of it will probably be published in the years to come. I write content for the podcast. I would say I'm a creator in that sense. I like to consider myself somewhat of a teacher / guide when it comes to these practices. And I had a couple MDs that I was working with out in the US last year, where I was helping lead their mental fitness programming. And the one guy, he always would tell me, he said, you need to call yourself a mental fitness practitioner. And I was like, that seems like, I think practitioner, I think of a doctor first and foremost. But if you look up the word, I mean, that isn't the case. It's just someone that, is passionate and is training in a particular practice of some sort or field, right? Which is, I mean, I do it day in and day out. So I'm starting to warm up to that term, mental fitness practitioner or strategist. So I guess to answer your question, definitely a hyphenated situation. I'd say, yeah, I'm working on being the best writer I can be. Definitely a creator in mental fitness type content, and somewhat of a guide and teacher when it comes to helping people individually, but also on the corporate side of things with teams and just helping people ask better questions.
So Marc, this actually brings me to my next question. I kind of want to go back. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journaling app, Kaya? How did journaling come into your life, and what motivated you to be part of creating this application?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we already covered how the app came to be, or where it came from. I can share a little bit more about just the way the app functioned, and the reason, one of the big reasons I think why we reached so many people with it was that the content or the questions that were in the app weren't, the majority of them were not coming from us. They were coming from other people. They were coming from people working at Lego or VaynerMedia or LinkedIn, or um, really respected professors like Adam Grant had content in the app as well. And, it was just, the idea was just to collaborate with as many people as possible in their respected fields of expertise, and then we were linking out to their work. If you wanted to go further, what we wanted was the questions, because when you were in that app, as soon as you tapped on one of those questions, if it resonated with you, it would fire up a new entry, and essentially you could then start your own journaling practice or reflection, which is what I was doing manually. Right, I'd be listening to a podcast, the guest would drop a really powerful question, I'd grab that, I'd write that down, and usually the next morning I was doing my practice, then I would reflect on it based on where I was at in my life. So that's what the app was doing, just in a little, in a more seamless way. So people resonate. I think people resonated with that. Apple definitely started to feature the app all around the world, which led to the majority of those app impressions. I want to say that at the end, where it's hard to count it because there's not actually really great analytics. You would think Apple has better analytics like this, but we were definitely featured in over 100 countries around the world, either as like new apps we love or app of the day, or at the time they were really big on creating different lists, like curated lists. So we were on the journaling list, which was wild to see, because some of those apps, there was one of them there, because there was really only one that I ever used, and it was an app called Day One, and I still use it to this day. But they were like the grandfather of this space, like just the consistent app that was always there. And I think I have over 1,000 entries in that app as we speak. But they, at the time, they weren't doing anything like what we were trying to do in terms of guiding people through the practice. Now there are a ton of them, and there's funded apps and funded companies that are doing that. But at the time, we were pretty novel on that. And we were showing up in that, under that app, or in some countries ahead of them. So it felt really nice. We were kind of the new guys on the block, but definitely getting some recognition there. But then, as I mentioned, we got to a point where we knew what we needed to do to iterate the product, but we were also not naive to the fact that we had just spent, nearly 2 years sorting out development, understanding the costs associated to new iterations in the app. And, we weren't financially or mentally prepared to take on a whole other level of risk and continue with another big update. Because it's not like, with the book, like it's coming out in October. Like I know that it's the product is finished. It right now it's, I'm talking about it, and I'm, seeing how people react and whatnot, but it's coming out, like there's an end goal there. Or there's a marker with the app. It comes like you can release the app, but is that the version that people are really going to resonate with? Is like there's almost no end in sight with amount of iteration, which made it really challenging, because I think it was about 3 years. I had to delete the app, but I had to delete like my identity for the last 3 years. And my backup plan was, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll go back to the old industry that I had come from. But throughout those 3 years, I evolved into a bit of a different person. I've become really passionate about mental fitness in this whole space, and wanted to stay in that whole preventative health arena. So now my backup plan no longer seemed to resonate or fit. And I'm left with massive financial implications because of that app. I'm in a city that I don't really necessarily enjoy living in a place that was supposed to be temporary and that I can't even afford, really. And with no plan forward for the first time in my life. So it was a dark time, really dark. I felt hopeless. I felt like physically sick, waking up a lot of the mornings, just not knowing, okay, like what am I going to do next? I had I think it would have been two at that point, a 2-year-old, and I was constantly worried if, is he picking up on like my extreme stress with my wife and I, just given we're going through this. So there was just a lot of questions that were actually not helping me get out of that scenario. And it wasn't until I was able to tap into the present moment as much as possible to pause that internal narrative of anxiety or anxious thoughts, that eventually, like day by day, was able to realize, wait a second, I've interviewed all of these incredible humans and they're asking a very different set of questions. And that was the moment, like that was the moment, at least for me, that I realized that all of us, no matter what's going on in our life, we're all one question away from a completely different life. And in the business setting, we're one question away from a completely different result or outcome. It's the same thing. It's the same principle. And that question for me was, what do I want for my life? And that was able to pause that negative narrative and that destructive narrative long enough for me to list out some things that, okay, yeah, my life has changed. The path has definitely changed, but this is what I want moving forward. And then I could work backwards and start asking other questions that would lead to the next, and basically provide some sort of a plan, which all that serves to do is to inject hope back into your life. And that's what we usually need. We need hope to then be able to have the courage to continue and do what we want to do, essentially.
Marc, I want to thank you for opening up there and sharing a lot of like the truth of your story and how everything evolved. And it sounds like you have an amazing wife that kind of supported you throughout the way. And you're absolutely right about, it takes out one question, right? Depending on what you're going through or what you're trying to do or where you're trying to move forward. So this actually brings me to my next question. Which question should every aspiring entrepreneur ask themselves before investing so much of themselves into their business?
There's a question that comes to mind, and it's not mine. It's something it's from Scott Belsky, who's in the book as well. He was the founder of Behance that was then acquired by Adobe. And now he's presently, I think he's the VP of product at Adobe. And I remember in our interview, and it's the opening prompt to his profile is, why am I building this? And I think I've thought about that question a lot. And I actually used one of it, another question of his later on, which helped me make the decision to delete that app or shut that business down. But I think at first you need to really understand why you're building it, and what is the vision, and what are the motivators that will keep you going through the journey. Because what happens, and what a lot of people don't talk about, is they don't talk about, and I'll use Scott's language here again, but the messy middle, right? Like when I was talking about the idea of the app, people got really excited. And so was I, like it's all rainbows and butterflies. Like, here's this new app. This is what we're going to do. This is why we're doing it. Here's what, here's the potential of this. Like, it's super exciting stuff. And then, and you can say that for a lot of different products and services. Then what normally happens is that the product, the service, or the team kind of goes away for a bit. And they don't surface unless either they never surface again, or they surface after a big event, like they're raising money, or they've been acquired, or they got massive press or something like that. But there's this period in between, which Scott calls the messy middle, that that's where all the magic is. That's where all the learning is. That's where all the work, that's where all of the mental battles that you'll have to have trying to survive and thrive. It all happens in those years. So, you need that motivation. Like, you have to be doing whatever you're doing for the right reasons, because it won't be enough. If it's just a financial thing, it will not be enough to pull you through that messy middle. And what happened on my side was, and this is another question of Scott's, was, when you're in that messy middle, there comes a point where it's okay to admit that you don't have the same level of conviction that you did when you first went into it. Because Scott, the question in a question format, he said, everyone should ask themselves at one point when you're in that tough, messy middle, do I have as much conviction, if not more, than when I started that I do right now, for example, with that product? And if the answer is no, then it's really hard to, again, keep the motivation and the drive to continue through that messy middle to wherever you're trying to go with this thing. So for me, the answer was no. Somewhere along the way, I knew that, the app was just a product down that path. I knew the journey, and hence why I'm still on this journey. The journey was right. And the industry of just helping people with their questions and mental fitness, that's 100% right. But that product, didn't link anymore. And now there's a book with it. I mean, I don't know how that'll do, but essentially it's following along the same path, just different. I'm in a different car, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like it took a lot of reassessment. It also took a lot of guts, right? And putting your ego down, especially when you had a lot of personal investments, whether that's money, stress, right? Good on you for having like the guts to kind of move forward with that decision and changing your life path. So Marc, which of the 6 types of questions forming the basis of the Socratic method have the greatest impact on you, and why?
Yeah, just for the listeners, I mean, so they've got some context. I mean, the book is called Personal Socrates, and it's called that because you can probably guess. I mean, I'm quite passionate about questions, and it really wasn't until speaking with my publisher and Joey, who's the CEO over there, that when I was explaining kind of the practice that I use with journaling and how I've seen that flow of questioning play out in interviews and whatnot and other kind of like top performers, he was like, oh yeah, the Socratic method. And I was like, yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I know of Socrates, probably like 90% of the rest of the world do. Like you hear the name and like, oh yeah, questions or asking why or something like that. And that's as far as my knowledge went. Unless you're a philosophy major, I'm sure you know a little bit more. But when I started to dig into Socrates and the Socratic method in particular, I saw why Joey suggested that as the book title and in the flow, because it absolutely was exactly what I was doing and what I continue to do. Socrates happened to have a flow of questions, but it was more of in an academic setting, or was at least discussed in that setting. And what I was realizing, and like to be completely truthful, there's 6 types. I mean, I couldn't bang them off in front of you right now. I'd have to open the book, and that was the problem. And that's why I wrote the book, to reshape that method and simplify it so that we could remember and group questions, or the way we think about whatever challenge or whatever situation we're dealing with in life, into something that we can easily remember. And those categories are: get clear, be intentional, and expand possibility. So, that we can remember. We can remember 3 things. And if you only remember one thing, and this goes right back to your direct question, you have to start with clarity and questions around seeking clarity or probing around your assumptions that you may have for whatever's going on. Because if you can't see where the root of the problem is, because we're often up on the surface level, then it's really hard to make any type of change, right? Just like if we're feeling anxious, like just slow down a bit. Where do you feel that in your body? Just like get out of the head for a second and feel it in your body. Where are you feeling that in your body? And often just even acknowledging that fact releases a lot of that tension. But then, what do I want from my life? That's a clarity seeking question. And from there, you ask more questions. Okay, well, I want the days to feel and play out like this. Well, then, what do I need to do for that to materialize, which then gets into intentionally living or designing the life and the work that you want. But it's hard to do that if you're not clear in what you want in the first place. So I would say if, people remember one thing here, is just when you're sitting back in reflection, ask questions that are progressive in nature, that allow you to to feel forward movement. Like, what do you want? What do I want in my life? Or what makes me smile each day? What motivates me? Like questions that push you forward and that also unlock clarity. Because from there, then then you get into that intention setting. And then when you're doing those two things, the third step of it just happens by default. All of a sudden you start seeing more things. All these signs and opportunity were there, but you see them like, yes, I need to go down that path. Like that feels right, because you're not fogged with all these emotions and thoughts. And it's like, if you think of a physical room and the room is jammed floor to ceiling with boxes, there's a lot of knowledge in there, and there are a lot of probably valuable things, but they're kind of useless if you don't know what's in the box and you can't even see the back corner of the room. So you need to blow out some of that stuff and just keep the things that you really need right now, and mentally, right? That means relationships, that means internal narratives that aren't serving you, like, feeling self-doubt, or maybe there's like imposter syndrome there. I mean, just, blowing that stuff out. And that's where questions can really help slow down the voice in your head to, bring some perspective to this stuff, right?
Absolutely. This reminds me a bit of, I don't know if you've heard of the book, The Desire Map by Danielle Laporte. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
heard of it.
Yeah. Another good Canadian.
Yeah, another good Canadian. But again, it's asking the right questions of, how you want to feel, connecting your values to your goals, right? Before setting intention. And so there's definitely some similarities there with living with intention or planning for intention. And I remember when I read that book, it wasn't just fun, asking how to say the hard truth questions of what values that I want to live, but also a lot of guiding questions to ask yourself before moving forward and before investing time and money. So yeah, thanks for kind of answering that question. I appreciate that. Moving to my next question, Mark, I wanted to take some time to get a better feel of mental fitness, right? I'm
Sure.
a physical educator trained, kind of like you said today. There's many other things I do. And so when I was looking it up, I'm going to share just with our kind of listeners here. Mental fitness is your capacity to handle life's challenges with a positive mindset rather than getting stressed or upset. As we grow up with hardwired negative thought patterns, it is often a challenge to develop that more positive mindset. So knowing this information, and this is just probably just a little intro here, Mark, right? I'm no expert here. But what is one powerful strategy that someone could develop to get a greater mental fitness?
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say, because I mean, I've looked up official definitions of mental fitness in the past as well. I've heard different renditions of what you just mentioned. And, I'm a simple guy. And on my side, the way I see it, I feel like it's worth sharing with the listeners just to try to grasp what this is. But to me, mental fitness is the umbrella for anything related to your mind. It's mental health, it's mental resilience, it's mental performance, but it's called mental fitness, or though I speak about it in the term of mental fitness, because again, fitness is something you're taking ownership of, just like for physical fitness, right? Like you're making the decision, I'm going to exercise to better my body, mind, soul, all of that stuff. Well, mental fitness, it's the same thing. So I like to speak of it in that term, because it doesn't come with all this the stigma of mental health and anything surrounding that. This is something that, because it's fitness, if I do something every day or consistently through my life, it's fitness, and also it's training to handle what's about to happen every day. Essentially, like we know things are going to rock our mind and our emotions and stress us or irritate us in some capacity. But just like a physical performance or an athlete, I mean, Olympians are great. Anyone doing any physical activity can attest to this, that, when you're in the event, you're not trying new things. You're relying on your baseline training. It's your baseline training that's giving you the confidence to handle the event in itself. And it's no different when it comes to your mental fitness. Like knowing you have the tools whether that's journaling, meditation, or breath work. There's so many different things. I just encourage people to be open and experiment, but knowing you have the tools to handle those situations that will come up, that in itself gives typically the confidence and a whole other mindset or mood boost for us as well. So, to answer your question directly, my suggestion is to not overdo it. Just like, again, back to physical fitness. I mean, if you've never run a mile or a kilometer in your life, like, you're not signing up for an ultra marathon, right? It's like, so set yourself up for success in this case. So if you're not doing any type of fitness for your mind presently, then just sit back, take a look at your day, write out the typical things you do in a day in terms of your rituals and routines, and look to see if there's anywhere in there where you can stack on a mental fitness practice. And here are some examples. So most of us have coffee or tea or some sort of liquid in the morning when we get up. A great place to add something in here is during that moment. For me, when my coffee is brewing, that's where I'm grabbing Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic. I flip open to see the passage for the day. It takes less than a minute to read that, but it sets up the next 24 hours for me to keep my mind in a positive state and also keep perspective. Because when you're reading, like in this case, I'm reading about Stoicism, but it just gives a perspective shift that, like, wait a second, these people, what they're writing about that happened 1200 years ago, it's the same shit. It's the same stuff that we're dealing with, the same emotions. So if they can handle it, so can I. And here's how Marcus Aurelius, for example, dealt with, a massive plague or something like that wiped out. It's quite fitting in terms of what's going on right now, but wiped out, millions and millions of people. And it just, for me, like that's what helps me stay focused on the controllables of my life. I can control how I'm going to react to something. So I'm reminded every single morning of that, so that when something comes up later in the day, that I'm not immediately jumping into reaction mode, and I'm trying to step back and zoom out a little bit and be like, okay, out of this scenario, what can I control? I can choose to not react in a way that is, fueled by fear or stress. I'm going to choose to react in a way that I just need to take one step forward. So, I mean, that's one that works for me. The other thing you can do that's a really kind of bang for your buck in terms of time versus effect, breath work. And you can download some free apps. I use Oak Meditation, which is an app developed originally by Kevin Rose. It's a meditation app, but there's a breath work section in there, which is also free. I think the most you can do in one of the breathworks settings is 5 minutes and 37 seconds or something. So we're not talking a lot of time, but if you do, I'm guarantee you, if you do that 5 minutes, you're physically going to feel different after. So, and what it does, no matter what you're doing or no matter what's looping in your mind, when you're focusing on your breath like that, you're not focusing on those thoughts. You're pausing that internal narrative. So again, I leverage that sometimes in the middle of the afternoon, either for an energy boost, like a 2 p.m., 3 p.m. energy boost, or if something has stressed me out or kind of rocked my mind, I'll just stop. I'll throw that on, do 3-4 minutes of breath work, and then I feel better and I can move forward. Because what we're trying to do is eliminate the potential of a looping narrative and just continually going and going to the point where you have a physical manifestation of that problem, right? Like, that feeling where we're like, oh, my shoulders are really tight, I need a massage or something like that. There's usually something way bigger behind that than just you need a massage or you've got, stiff traps or your neck is tight. So these practices, if you're doing them over time, you can avoid that stuff. I know when that happens to me, something is off. Something's off. And again, it's a forced moment of reflection to think, okay, I'm feeling that tension, which probably means that most of the day I'm sitting with my shoulders upright, which means I'm stressed in some capacity. Like, why? right? And take a look at your calendars or some, are you over committing? Is there something that's bothering you? But again, that's that first step, is taking a moment to get clear. Because then now I know, okay, well, this is probably what it is. Then you can make some intentional adjustments. Then you unlock possibility.
Thanks for sharing that answer, Mark. That was very detailed, and you definitely gave a lot of value there. Before I continue asking about your book, I want to acknowledge you are one of the top 50 podcasts globally right now in the health sector, where your podcast called Behind the Human with over 200 interviews. So if you could share with everyone, what is your podcast about and why has your podcast become so popular? Why do people like it?
That's a hard, I don't know, to be completely truthful on why it's in and out of those rankings every week in different countries. The only thing I can say what I'm doing is that, again, continuing the spirit of that journaling app and what this book's about, is that I'm interviewing people about the mental fitness practices that are keeping them at the top of their game personally and professionally. But I'm interviewing people that you potentially wouldn't expect to hear about those practices, like a voice coach, or a chef or designer or writer or, a marketing strategist. Like, I'm pulling the practices, I'm doing the best to pull the practices in relatable use cases for people that have regular jobs, not just meditation coaches or yoga instructors, or, personal wellness coaches that you would expect, obviously, that they're dialed in that space. And I've had some of those people, and I continue to bring it in because they're really passionate and obviously really up to speed with the latest practices and whatnot. So it's great learning opportunity, selfishly on my side as well, and for the listeners. But I like to mix it up, and bring in, again, like Olympians or just all these different types of people to see, okay, well, share your story, share your path. Everyone has like those peaks and valleys. And when you're in the valleys trying to rise up or summit to the peak, like, what are you doing? And I'd say, well, 100% of them are doing some sort of reflection, and whether that's pen to paper or not, I call journaling just reflection. The practice is reflection. The method can be different. It could be just thinking on a walk. It could be doing an audio note. It could be writing pen to paper, using an app, whatever. But the practice is reflection, and 100% of them are doing some sort of reflection. Typically, they have really big questions behind that reflection. So that's my job. My job is to unpack those questions. For example, like this evening, I have a podcast with the CEO of Vayner Speakers. And I just want to know, like, that guy's been, working as an agent for multiple years with some of the best speakers in the world, and is now running Vayner Speakers. Like, what's the self-talk for really good speakers? And like, how did he navigate that? How did he leave? He was a top agent for CAA and is now the CEO with Gary Vaynerchuk over at, most people know his agency. Like, what questions was he asking to make that jump, and why? So like, that's the kind of stuff that I like to unpack, because then we can apply that to our own lives in our own way.
We're all naturally curious, right? So the fact that you're constantly bringing unique personal questions from greats who are out there, it's something that's definitely very attracting, right? To a lot of people who are listening, right? We're naturally, I'll say again, we're naturally curious. So Mark, I want to now go to your book. I want to dive a little deeper here. I know you're about to launch it. It's coming up in October. So
yeah,
pretty psyched for you. Congrats.
Thank you.
When we look at your book, Personal Socrates, there is reflective questioning, developing great questions, better questions. So can you just tell us more about your book? Like, why the title, and what is your book all about?
Yeah, in short, the book is the tagline really is just better questions, better life. And like I said earlier, I think, we're all one question away, right, from a different life. And I experienced that personally. I've seen it play out. I've seen questions literally save lives when it comes to mental health. So, we all ask questions. It's just are we asking the right questions, quality questions, and are they timed in the right way to help us in the best way possible? So that's why it's called Personal Socrates. We already talked about, the method or the backbone behind it. If I'm going to write a book about questions, I've got to go to the person that basically invented the flow of questioning like that. So that's where the Personal Socrates comes up. And then again, the other element is just the relatability, just like the podcast. The subtitle of the book is Questions That Will Upgrade Your Life from Legends and World-Class Performers. So the idea is that other than reading an introduction from start to finish, people, can pick this up, and it can be their mental fitness for the morning, because they're 2 to 4 page profiles. And the idea is that if they're in the table of contents looking at either the prompt that is there or the name beside the prompt, something should resonate based on where they're at in their life. And the idea is that start where it feels right for you, because that's the natural point where you'll get the most value. And then what happens as you continue, the book just evolves with you as your life evolves. So, the idea again is anyone that's still around here present day, I've interviewed. So James Clear, Claude Silver from VaynerMedia, Ryan Holiday's in there, Apollo Ono, who's the most decorated Winter Olympian in the US, he's in there. But then there are people that anyone would recognize that have passed, like Maya Angelou, Kobe Bryant, Stephen Hawking, Jane Austen, like legends from the past that I went and did the research to understand, not necessarily the exact questions they asked themselves, but understand their life and their journey and the things that they were doing to inspire the questions that are in that profile that can then help us. Like Picasso, what is my art reflecting back? That's, you don't have to be a painter to leverage that one. That is, sub out art for work, like the things that you're most passionate about in terms of what you're doing right now. Like what is that reflecting back about your life right now? Again, jumping into some reflection to see if there's anything that you can uncover and unleash another whole set of opportunities. Or Kobe Bryant is like, how do I get to the rim? Has nothing to do with basketball. That profile has everything to do with how he used to negotiate with himself mentally to get up an hour earlier out of his bed to do an extra workout before the rest of the team. We all can negotiate ourselves out of doing things in the bed, for sure. Like everyone's had that, you know what, maybe just another 10 minutes. Or I had it too, because I used to write this book early in the morning. Like, you know what, I need some additional sleep. Sleep's important. Like this is all happening like warp speed, well, within seconds, right? And everyone does this in their own way. Oh, I'll write in the afternoon. I don't have any meetings. So I'll get the extra hour of sleep because that's, sleep's important and that's good for my health. There's some truth to that, but at the end of the day, what happens? I mean, life happens and you don't write at 2:00 in the afternoon because something has come up and there's a reason why I was setting up my days to write early in the morning. But that's the mental negotiation that Kobe talks about, or that I profile in his write-up, that, some tactics and stuff like that to blow that out so that we're not then sidetracked, because then that turns into, something that becomes a problem. One off, it's whatever, it's one time, but consistently, then all of a sudden we have issues, right? So yeah, that's the book. If you already have mental fitness, it's designed to add a different flair to your practices through the questions. And there's a ton of different actual practices within the profiles as well. It's not just journaling. And then if you don't have a practice, I feel really grateful that I've got Ryan Holiday in here as a profile, but I would use this book just like I use Ryan Holiday's book to, as my coffee's brewing. The profiles are designed to be really consumable in a short period of time and have some high impact or high value quickly.
That's awesome, Mark. Thanks for giving a deeper dive there kind of on everything. And I really enjoyed too hearing about and also seeing that Kobe is featured in your book, because as we all know, right, he was doing a lot of big things besides basketball, kind of like you phrased it, right? Literally a legend, right? And
Yeah.
it amazed me when I was listening to a podcast by Lewis House. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's when he interviews how he goes to interview Kobe, right? Because Kobe had all these bigger, deeper kind of goals and things that he was doing. And he essentially arrives at his studio, and the interview was scheduled for 7 a.m., but he decides to go earlier just to be there because it's a big deal, meeting with Kobe. And Kobe, there he was at, I think, 5 a.m. or 5:30, just meditating and kind of getting in the zone before an interview at 7 a.m., right? So
Yeah.
again, having that mental practice and that also attitude and that kind of winning mindset. This actually leads to my next question. In your book, you just mentioned it provides questions that will upgrade someone's life. So why did you decide to include answers from legends and world-class performers?
Well, there's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that there's answers from world-class performers, because the answers need to come from you on the other side. I mean, we can all give answers to something, but they're a hell of a lot more relatable and usable if you're coming up with those answers. What the profiles do from these people is again just provide a different context and relatability factor, just like what I'm trying to do with the podcast, right? So like I said, everyone knows Kobe, so immediately then we can understand, like, we have some history of him. I don't have to go and do, like, I'm not writing a biography on these people. There's brilliant people that have already written massive books on Kobe, like Coco Chanel's in there, Jane Austen, all these different people, Stephen Hawking. But we understand like we have a high level view of their work, and then this goes into some more of the specifics around their mind and their mental fitness, and again provides us a different perspective that we can then apply to our own lives, right? Like, for example, I mean, Stephen Hawking, everyone knows he was diagnosed with ALS. He's done some incredible things with as a physicist and for that whole community, and that, pushing science forward in that respect. Well, he was diagnosed with ALS at 21 years of age. And at that time, the life expectancy was 3 to 5 years, but he lived until he was, I think, 76 or 78. Why? And, I can't say for certain, but I have a pretty clear hunch that it was his internal self-talk and the narrative that he spoke to himself and others that kept him going that long. It was his curiosity. He had an unlimited amount of questions to understand what was happening in the universe, and he provided a perspective to himself as well. There's a line in the book, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'll paraphrase. Basically, he said something to the effect of, I feel really lucky that my disability isn't as bad as it could be, because I still have my mind to explore the universe, or something to that effect. And I just remember reading that, like, man, he feels lucky to have, like, at that time. I mean, he's controlling his wheelchair and typing with the blink of his eye in his cheek. Like, that's the only movement he's got. And he's still grateful for being lucky that it's not as bad as it could be. I mean, so to me, it's just, when I read things like that, it pauses me and thinks, okay, just like the Stoic philosophy, it pauses, you know what? I feel like things may not be great right now, or I'm trying to work myself out of a valley to get to that peak, but that's the wrong attitude. I mean, you can choose to have an attitude like Stephen Hawking or Kobe Bryant, and these are some of the questions you can ask and some of the practices that you can use to do that. That's why these people are in the book.
So, Mark, there's a lot of great books out there, right? So many books that also ask, thought-provoking questions. How will this book be better and greater than other books that are out there on the market?
Oh man, you know what? I wouldn't say greater and better. I mean, I think all books have a purpose. All I can hope is that, I'm writing this from a perspective of, this stuff really saved me from definitely a deep depression after that whole experience with Keo. I see what questions do for other people, and I see how reflection is the backbone of some of the greatest people that have lived the planet and the people that inspire us. And all I can hope is that there's one prompt or one practice or one piece, quote, or something out of this book that helps pull someone on the other side out of whatever autopilot that they're on, so that they can pause that and then see a different perspective and open up to a whole different, way of looking at questions and way of leveraging questions in their lives. So, I read a lot of books. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there. I think what's different is there's no book out there that's called Personal Socrates. That's for sure. I think it's pretty unique in the way it's structured and the way it can be consumed. And yeah, I'm really proud of it because I had to use the practices to actually get it out myself.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that humble response there, Mark. So how long did it take you to write this book? Did you have to do extensive research? And if so, what did it look like? Is writing a book like this, a huge process?
Just like what we talked about with Scott Belsky and creating a new product and bringing something to the world, I make sure that before you jump into a book project that you know why you're doing it and there's a motivator there fueling it, because it is hard to write a book. It's probably one of the hardest things I've done. This will be out in October, and that'll be 2 years of working on this, a solid year of writing, of actual writing, and then almost a year of just putting it together from a production standpoint, and then now making sure that people know about it and the marketing and things like that. So it's not a small feat. I'm working on the audio book, recording it here in my home studio as well, and like that's a that's a whole other product that you almost forget that you know how to read when you're doing an audiobook. So all to say, I mean, it's a huge project. It's a really huge project. And I think I'm really proud of it, but I'm also really proud of the work that was put into it. I mean, because you'll see there's some people that, just try to bang out a book really fast, and they're using it to try to pitch speaking or something like that, which, everyone has their motivations, but I don't know. I mean, I've talked to enough authors now that it takes a good year to write a book, a good book or a book around that, around 250 to 400 pages or whatever, when it comes to nonfiction, because it just takes time. I mean, I was talking to the editor that was on Stephen Hawking's book, Brief History of Time, and he probably gave the best advice to me that I could have received. And he said, you can't force writing. You have to be one with the process. And at sometimes that doesn't feel the greatest because you want to get a certain word count out every day, or in my case, I wanted to finish a profile. But, ironically, Stephen Hawking was one of them that I had to pause and come back to. And I started another one that I knew would be easier to write. And then I came back to Stephen Hawking, and then it felt a little bit easier. So yeah, all to say, I mean, it's a big process. It's like any big project. You'll get what you put into it. But I would just encourage everyone to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons that feel good to you. And most importantly, enjoy the process of it. Like enjoy the struggle that will come with it, but also, celebrate the wins along the way and finishing a chapter or finishing your words or whatever. Like enjoy it. You only get that experience once.
Awesome, Mark. Thanks. So Mark, as you know, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire people to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. Kobe Bryant has said, I think of the definition of greatness is to inspire the people next to you. I think that's what greatness is or should be. It's not something that lives and dies with one person. It's how you can inspire a person to then in turn inspire another person that then inspires another person. That's how you create something that I think lasts forever. I think that's our challenge as people, is to figure out how our story can impact others and motivate them in a way to create their own greatness. So as someone who knows Kobe pretty well from researching him, Do you agree with his definition of greatness? What is yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hard to disagree with that. I think greatness is showing up as yourself and being authentic and being a kind human. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. We put a lot of labels on greatness and what that is, and we put a lot of materialistic things on our definitions like followers and financials and things like that. But you don't remember that. You remember an interaction with a good human. We talked about that when we were talking about your dad, and you know that's what I remember. I remember a nice big smile. I remember someone that's got your back, and someone that I'd have their back. So to me, that's greatness.
Absolutely. That's beautiful, Mark. And I totally agree with you. That's part of my mission here is to bring on people that just who actually live their full truth and like their full selves and who are doing great things, whether it's a great neighbor or whether it's someone that is doing inspiring things like yourself through writing. So Mark, last question before we go. Who is a future guest that you would like to see on this show?
The best future guest is the one that feels right to you, honestly. I mean, and that's not a cop-out answer because I mean, there's millions of people that can guest on any show. And I've, as we speak right now, and I feel fortunate to have this position, but like there's probably 3 or 4 emails in my inbox suggesting a guest. And the only way I make a decision on that, it's not numbers and social media and stuff like that, is just, does it feel right? Is that someone that, for me, just like this book hopefully lands in the right place for someone, does that guest land in the right place for me at the time, knowing the people I've already interviewed, knowing the people that are coming up, because I want to make sure the listener on the other side has a really true and like authentic experience listening, versus I've booked people before based on numbers and things like that, and those aren't the greatest interviews. And I always, it's only happened a couple times, but the outcome, you wouldn't be, I don't think you probably can't pick them out on the podcast, and I'm obviously not going to share the names, but I knew at the end of that interview that I wasn't 100% into it or something felt off. So yeah. So to answer your question, I mean, follow your gut on that one. And if someone inspires you, reach out to them.
Awesome, Mark. I appreciate that answer, and I will try and apply that as best as I can. So, Mark, where can our listeners go to find you online?
The easiest place that'll direct you to, my socials, podcast, book, all that stuff is just behindthehuman.com.
Okay, perfect. Awesome, Mark. So, Mark, I want to take the last moment here to thank you for your time. You've been extremely generous. And I'm sure all of my listeners have really enjoyed listening to this episode. So thanks again, Mark, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review.